Oh, I'm on. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lisa Murray from Creative Alchemy, and the topic for today is creating your future. Did you forget to do it? Now, this is a really funny topic, okay? Because often we think we've created our future, we think we are creating our future, and yet we're not. We're pretty much creating a variation of our past. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is that when we become really aware of why we would create our future, and not only why we would create our future, but why we would create a different future, then we actually get to make different choices. And hi, everyone who's joined. Thanks for coming to play with me. And, the thing is, almost every choice I make creates a different future, okay? And the difference between me and most people is that I'm aware I'm creating the future with all of those choices. So when I make a choice, I'm looking at it for now and the future, okay? Now, most people think if they can create for today, that's enough. And in one sense it is, right? Because you can only live in this moment right now. And what would it be like to create for now and the future? And if you did that, would it actually create greater possibilities? And when I say greater possibilities, I don't necessarily mean that in the way of... So you know how, like, if you made a vision board and you've got all your pretty things on there and, all your hot, sexy cars and all those different things, a lot of people think that's creating your future. And for me, that's not creating my future. That's actually like, yeah, sure, there are things I might like to ask for, but it's not necessarily what creates my future. What creates my future is being something different and actually allowing that to show me what is possible that I've never even considered. And this is, I think, why I love the realm of ideas so much, because every time I play with an idea, I get to explore different possible futures. Now, sometimes I choose them and sometimes I don't. And sometimes we choose futures that we don't realize we've chosen. A case in point would be that really crappy job or that really crappy relationship that you ended up in. You chose that future, you just didn't realize it was going to be a crappy one. And, often it's this thing of we think that we've asked for what we want, but actually we're creating something totally different. So what I'd invite you to do is, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, all right? Hi, everyone who's joining. And what I'd invite you to do with this is have a look at, well, if you had a clean slate, if you woke up tomorrow and you did not remember anything about your past, what kind of future would you want to create? And if the entire world had the same situation, if literally, one night something showed up and we all woke up the next day and literally no one remembered what the world was like yesterday, yeah, it might create a little bit of temporary chaos, but what would you create different? Like what would you actually truly, truly, truly desire the world to be like? If you didn't know that judgment existed, for example, would you choose to judge people? If you didn't know that you had to have money, would you create a totally different way of functioning? And this is really, for me, the very interesting thing about creating a future is you start to actually look at the entire world as if nothing is set in stone. And, I was listening to an interview earlier today with Nilofer Merchant, and she's talking about different ways of how really big ideas actually can be brought to fruition. And when I say big, not just, big in a business sense, but big things that actually change the world in really marvelous ways. And often it's not about deciding that what we know is right. It's actually about looking at, well, what if we didn't know anything was right? What if we could actually just look at everything as a totally fresh possibility. And if we didn't have to prove that we knew the right answer, and if we didn't have to actually show other people that they're wrong and we're right, what is possible? And she gave some real, I'll actually post the link to the interview later actually, because she gave these really incredible examples of different things that people have been able to change by actually having this space of just allowance and no judgment. And so I wonder what creating your future even is for you. Like, have you ever looked at, well, what is that for me? You know, and if you are willing to look at, well, what is that? And would I even like to do it? Because a lot of people I've talked to, and here's the thing, if you are really resistant of change, then you're probably actually quite resistant to creating your future, okay? And that's a really interesting thing, because some people will be hating on me right now going, oh my God, but you know, that doesn't mean the same thing at all. Well, have a look at it. If you're creating a future that's different to your past, change is a part of that. And if you're not willing to look at, well, what would I like to change? What could be changed? What have I not even considered changing that if I did would totally create something even more amazing than anything I've had so far? You know, and this is the thing, is I think we get very stuck in our comfort zones. And I know I've talked about comfort zones, you know, going back a month or two, and people were like running scared from the room. And yet for me, it's like, well, what if we actually started to look at what's not working in our daily life, what's not working, and not fixing it, but creating a totally different possibility. Because when we go to fixing things, it takes a lot of energy, and usually the change becomes quite incremental. And what I'm aware of, like, you know, I used to be a change manager in corporate, and I did a lot of work in different areas with change. You know, marketing is a lot about change, actually. And I had a lot of jobs that involved marketing. And what I really noticed was that the people who were not resistant to the change, the people who were like, well, how can I get this to work for me? How can I get this to be even better than it was before? Those people created magic out of exactly the same situation that other people created a shitstorm out of. Okay? And so this is really the essence of creating your future. It's looking at what are your choices, what are the available choices, and then what are you going to do with them? And so this is a topic that I love exploring in great depth. And I'm going to invite you to something really fun, actually. I thought I would like to do a mastermind series, literally run a mastermind where the energy and the approach is about creating your future, and literally sort of turning it inside out, upside down, and looking at what are the possibilities. Because often we talk about possibilities as if they're this real thing, but there's no energy behind that conversation. And what I'm really interested in is putting a lot of energy behind that conversation so that when we talk possibilities, they're real and they're actualizable, and they're actually not just pipe dreams. Because so much of what I hear people talk about when they talk about creating their future, it's just pipe dreams. It's stuff that will never come to fruition. You know, it's kind of like, when I have $1 million, then I will blah, blah, blah. And that's not creating your future, actually. That is, you know, delusional in some ways. And when I say that, I'm not saying you won't have $1 million, but it's like, well, what are you being, and what are you curious about that's going to show you the path to the $1 million? And that's what I want to delve into in these masterminds. I want to get really into the detail of possibilities and into the questions that maybe you've never even considered before, questions that you just, it's just not even in your reality. And if you want to have a little taster of some of the questions, and these are just ones that I play with, but we're going to have a lot more in the mastermind, then I'll put a link here afterwards that'll actually give you a little download of the questions that are just fun to play with in terms of creation of your future. Because it's like, you know, this is a planet of free choice. And I've been really looking at this a lot. I mean, through my whole life, I've been looking at this a lot. But at the moment, I'm particularly curious about it, because if you look through Facebook, for example, you see so many posts where people have not acknowledged and are not using their free choice. And when I really look at the energy that I would like to bring to the world, one of those things is to liberate the awareness of having free choice, liberate the possibility that you don't have to do what you think you should do for the rest of your life, liberate the possibility that any future you desire is possible if you're willing to be what it takes to create it. And for some people, hi everyone who's joining, nice to see you. And for some people, it's like they have this idea, but the gap seems so big that they're like, well, how would I even start to create that? And that's one thing I'm really good at, is seeing, well, where are the, like, almost like the rocks in the stream that you can leap across, so that you don't actually have to go step by step by step by step by step. A lot of creation is taught that you have to do everything step by step. And I like to do it in a totally different way, because for me, it's like, well, here's where I'm going roughly. And okay, universe, what do you got? And in playing with that, all sorts of fascinating things show up in my life that I never would have expected. And this is the energy that I really want to play with people in the mastermind, is showing you how this actually works in reality and exploring what we could do together that would actually create the futures that you really desire. In a group I'm in today, someone asked, well, if you could make, do you believe you can make $100,000 a month? And if you could, what would you do with the money? And it was so very interesting to see that some people had these really huge things of, yep, I can, and this is what I'm going to change, and this is what I'm going to create in the world. And other people were like, nope, I can't even see any possibility for that. Now, my point of view with that is that if you want to play with that, if you want to explore that, you can. And it doesn't have to be hard work. And yes, you're absolutely right, Paul, about the shoulds and coulds, and that's why I look at creating your future is it's totally choice. It's about freedom. It's about liberation. It's about all of those things where you actually get to explore the magic of this planet, because we live on this incredible, incredible planet that has free choice, that has so much available, and we use 0.00001% of the choice that's available to us. And then we wonder why our life is boring, or why it sucks, or why it's the same as it was last year. I've had an extremely different year this year to what I had last year. And I really desire to create it that next year is an extremely different year to this year. And that doesn't make any of them better or worse than the others. It just means that I don't want to live the same year of my life 50 times over. When I worked in shopping centers, there was this kind of joke that would go around, and it would be like, yeah, such and such says they've got, 15 years experience. But you want to ask them, have they got 1 year's experience 15 times, or have they got 15 years of experience? And it's the same for living our life, right? It's this thing of, well, you might have been alive for 30 years or 50 years or 100 years, whatever it might be, but has every one of those years given you something different, given you something exciting and thrilling and magical to look forward to? Because if it hasn't, well, what are you doing with your life? So anyway, that's really what I want to talk about. Does anyone have any questions? Is anything I've said you want me to expand on, or is there anything that's not clear in what I've said? Because I know that not everyone looks at it this way. And for me, it's like this whole sort of thing of, let me see. It's like we think of ourselves as too small to make a difference, and there's the very famous Nelson Mandela / Marianne Williamson quote. I don't even know, I can never remember who actually did the quote, but one of them. And where it's basically saying, if you think you're too small, and really we are so much more than what we imagine. And this is really for me where I look at this whole thing of creating our future. Because if we had thousands of people, even just thousands of people, actively, joyfully creating a more blissful future, do you sense that that would make a difference in the world? Because if it would, then what are you waiting for? Okay, because you can be one of those thousands of people. You don't have to do it all by yourself. And this is the reason I want to play with the masterminds with this particular topic, because it's so easy to think that we have to do all of this by ourselves. And okay, so I'll talk about your question in a minute, Veronica, actually, because I just want to finish my train of thought here. So yeah, this thing of doing it by ourselves, you know, and I talked in the Creative Alchemy Facebook group yesterday, this whole thing of like creating together rather than doing everything alone. And I also talked about it a little bit more in my love notes today that I sent out, because literally when we think we're doing it all alone, and when we've, you know, it's kind of like dragging this big sack of potatoes up Mount Everest, you know, not really a fun thing to do. But when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are creating a future that brings more joy to the world, that brings more pleasure to the world, that brings more, you know, creative energies to the world, that brings more adventure, that brings a whole lot of different things, then that makes a really big difference compared to if you have those same thousands of people creating the same life that they've lived for the last 25 years, or even not less fun than that, creating a worse life than they've lived because they've given up. Which then brings me to Veronica's question. She said, how do you stay creative and inspired if things don't seem like they're changing for a long time? Look, it's a really great question. And, you know, I've had periods like that in my life where I was like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? You know, and sometimes that period is 2 weeks and it feels like 20,000 years. And sometimes that period does go on for a year or two where it just feels like you're not really getting anywhere. You're not really changing anything. And one thing I would say about that is you want to take a quantum leap. You want to do something so different that it actually creates a little bit of chaos in your world. And I don't mean chaos in terms of havoc. I mean chaos in terms of creative energy. Because usually what's going on when things are just kind of stuck is that you're keeping all very similar points of view to what you've had before. You're keeping all the same habits. You're keeping all the same people. There's a lot of sameness in your world. And what you want to do is shake that up by looking at how much difference you can create in your world. Okay? And so that there, the how do you stay creative and inspired, for me comes down to adding pleasure to my life, actually. And so I've learned, and you know, it wasn't an easy learning, this one, because I used to like just create something for the sake of it, basically, when I was in those what I call the lulls. Actually, I wonder, I talked about the lulls lately. Where did I do that? I can't actually remember. I'll see if I can find the link for the conversation about the lulls. Oh, it was in my Business Alchemy group, so no, I can't actually share that publicly. But basically, I did talk about the whole thing of what to do in a lull. And yeah, but what I'm going to say to you is that if you're in a lull, enjoy it, basically, because that enjoyment will actually take you somewhere new. But if you're resisting it, the lull is going to stay there for so much longer, because the lull is also there for a reason, okay? And it's like, it might be there to show you to choose to create a new future. Okay, it might be there because there's a few things waiting to fall into place. There's a whole lot of different reasons why the lull can be there. The fact that it is there, your choice in that moment is to look at, well, do I resist it, or do I play with it, or do I enjoy it, or what else is actually possible with it? You know, and they're just a few of the choices. So that's what I'd invite you to look at, is how you actually get to this energy of creating your future in every moment. Because what I will say about that is, as you do that and as you stop resisting the lulls only come when there's good reason. And when I say good reason, they only come when, like for me, you know, this last 6 months has been much quieter than normal in my life. And in my creation world as well. I haven't been madly creating things because there hasn't been a lot of energy for it. And I don't mean I haven't physically had the energy, but there hasn't been a lot of energy for creation. And then in about and I've been enjoying a lot of that time. I've got to say I've had a pretty cruisy, relaxed year so far. And in the last 3 or 4 days, it's like it is totally turned up. And there are so many ideas. It's literally like so many ideas I cannot sleep. I am so excited. And when I say excited, it's more like it's just so much energy pumping through my universe. And so you'll know that, you'll know when it changes. actually, if you're not resisting the change. But if you're always resisting the change, then it's going to stay like that. And this is the whole thing that I want to play with in the masterminds is, and I think Brenda has asked about, was it Brenda? Someone. Yes, Brenda asked about questions and tools for sensing the energy to create. This is something I want to work with very closely in the mastermind group, because there's a thing about flow. And yes, there's lots of different ways that you can work with the flow and go with the flow. And when I say go with the flow, I don't mean in a really passive, not choosing kind of way. I mean in an active, aware kind of way, basically. And so when you actually know how to read that energy and how to make the most of that energy, whether it's full on like mine is at the moment, or whether it's the lull where you're just like, yeah, I think I'll just lie on the beach for another day, you know, and what if neither of them are right or wrong? What if they're just, oh, that's what's available right now. Where can I go with that? So that's a place to start, is really looking at, well, what are you making wrong and what if it's not? So Jay has said, what about feeling inundated with creativity? It can be overwhelming with choices. Yes, it can. So what I'm going to say to you, first of all, is write it all down and then ask to be aware of when your ideas are ready to be created. Okay? And overwhelm usually just means you need more information. And often that information is about timing. So it's not nearly as complicated as we make it. It's actually a really simple thing. And it's not okay, so if you call it a creative overload, then that's what you're going to create. So this is exactly the energy that I'm looking at with creating your future, okay? Everything you, how do I put this? So every word you use, every point of view you have creates what you're having in your life. And so if you call it creative overload, like, you know, the intensity of energy and information that's coming to me, if I called that creative overload, I would be frazzled. And I'm not calling it creative overload. I'm literally going, okay, universe, what do I do with all this? And I'm in the question with it. And that is creating a totally different possibility, okay? And literally, because I'm willing to be really calm with the intensity of information that is coming to me, it's coming in really ease-filled ways. And in fact, I'm so aware of, you know, probably the next 6 months of creation, and it's not at all what I expected, but it's just like, okay, next thing, next thing, next thing. So your point of view creates your reality, is what I'm going to say. And your point of view will create your future. So if you make that intensity of creative energy wrong, you will mess up your future. If you find a way to be with those energies, and that's one of the things we will work with in the Creating Your Future Mastermind, if you find a way to be with those energies so that it works for you, and literally, you know, I've spent an enormous amount of my life doing this, because for me, I mean, you know, I am, you know, what some people would call highly sensitive, what other people would call aware, and literally the intensity of stimulation in my world can be overwhelming if I allow it to be that. And it can also be totally inspiring and totally blissful if I allow it to be that. So I have the choice in here, you know, and you can stay in your story with that, or you can create a different future. And this is exactly what I'm talking about in this whole thing. It's like, what future do you want to create? Do you want to create the one where you're always in overwhelm every time you get too many ideas? Or do you want to create a future where you get to use those ideas to create something amazing in the world? And it's just choice. There's no right or wrong, right? It literally is just choice. And, you know, like for me, this whole resistance of the lull. Now, I've been like that my entire life. And, you know, I'm nearly 50. And I finally, this last few weeks, realized that I'm just not going to choose that anymore, that I'm going to do something different. And it was very liberating to actually create that different choice. Because at the end of the day, now I'm like, oh, well, if I don't have to resist that, I wonder what contribution it can be. And so there's a whole different sort of energy that's actually coming with that. And this is, you know, the thing about, if you know how to play with your creative energies in a way that creates your future, you will not fuck yourself over. And sorry for the people who've got kids. Sorry, I probably shouldn't swear. But anyway, I do. I am that. And probably if you go on my lives often enough, you'll know that I do. But it's literally this thing where, you know, you have the choice as to how your gifts play out in the world. And you can use them for you, for the world, for a future that you would like to see in the world, or you can let them mess you up. And that choice is actually the creation of your future. And that's the choice that I look at every day, all day. And it's not like I'm thinking about it nonstop, but I'm aware of it nonstop. So there you go. That's a bit of a starting point in terms of what I'm going to do with these Creating Your Future Masterminds. If you've got questions, feel free to hook up and have a chat with me one-on-one about the masterminds. And I will put a link in the post when I finish to book a time if you're interested in that. And if you're like, yep, I want to create a different future, I'm ready to have some new tools for that, because we're going to dive deep. And also, it's about connecting with other people who are also interested in creating a greater future, because it's very easy to feel alone when you're in this stage, you know, and it might be a greater future for you personally. It might be a greater future for the world. And, you know, that it doesn't actually matter, because there's this magic that shows up when we actually all come together and bring our collective awareness to different possibilities. So that's the magic. And you know, there's so much magic that comes when people contribute to each other. And that's what I desire to create with these masterminds, is this real strong energy of contribution. And yeah, so come play. And I wonder what future you could create that you have never considered. And that's the thought I'm going to leave you with, or the question I'm going to leave you with for today. So thank you all for coming to play. I'm really grateful. And thank you for your cool questions. They're really awesome. And yeah, I wonder what other questions we can explore, because it won't start for a couple of weeks. So I'll probably have another couple of conversations about this from different angles, and just see what you'd like to know about creating your future that maybe you've never even considered before. Okay, have a really good day, evening, adventure, afternoon, morning, whatever it is for you. And we'll chat again soon. See you later.